Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Monday, September 25th, 2017 edition of VR News. A little slower today. Actually surprised me a little bit because I feel excitement about VR, and not just my usual positivity about VR, but just in general. I think this holiday season in particular is going to be really good for virtual reality. But with that said, let's get started. The first story, Sony CEO Andrew House with some interesting comments to Reuters magazine. So he had an interview and mentioned to them last week, to Reuters magazine, that he wasn't entirely comfortable with leading the market by such a margin that seems to be happening right now, referencing the Rift and Vive sales. He goes on to say, with such a brand new category, you want a variety of platforms all doing well to create that rising tide and create the audience. I thought that was an interesting comment because it goes hand in hand with what we've been saying from day one. Competition is good. Businesses realize competition is good. The ideal of having a monopoly, yeah, look, it can be beneficial. Let's not kid anybody here. But there are definite advantages to having healthy competition. And as he so rightfully pointed out, the beginning of a technology, one of those times where it's really good to have competition. So yeah, just interesting choice of words about the overall state of the VR market. We know it's been a little slower than we like, specifically on the gaming front of things. But like I said, I've got a good feeling about this holiday season and beyond. The recent price cuts, no doubt going to help. But for the rest, time, technology, that's what we need to take care of things. Prices going down and bulk going down in parallel. Next story, the latest Chrome update. This is the Chrome 6.1 update for Daydream. Allows Daydream VR users to browse websites and be able to enjoy the VR experiences delivered by WebVR. Chrome team member Francois Beaufort releasing the news on Google+, saying that the first set of VR features now available to try out in Chrome 61, which is the latest stable build of the mobile browser. He went on to say, so far, this allows users to view and interact with any website in VR, follow links between pages, and move between 2D and immersive viewing for sites that support WebVR. This is just the beginning for web browsing in VR, so stay tuned. There's much more to come. And next up, I feel I need to provide a small explanation to not just sound bitter and jaded with regards to fishing. So I'm going to clarify things. There was an English trailer for Final Fantasy XV Monster of the Deep, which is, of course, the virtual reality release for that game. The English trailer, the hope is it's going to sell a bit more of the game to the global audience, those who understand English. You know what? Every once in a while, you need to take something you're not sure about, let it percolate off to the side, and then come back, reevaluate it a bit later. But when I think of all the things they could have done with Final Fantasy characters, guys, to make this more interesting, fresher for VR, and then they decide to take on fishing. And that's where I think the explanation comes in. Don't get me wrong, I have gone fishing, but for me, a pretty damn scarring experience. Partly in jest, partly out of truth. So I went fishing for the first time, age 5, with my dad. Not necessarily because he wanted me to go, more because my mom wanted me to go and basically forced his hand. Now, this is something he typically enjoyed doing alone. So I accompany him, sit completely still for about 4 hours. Finally, the monotony of fishing, believe me, it's a sport of patience, guys, was broken by a request from the old man to get him something from the car. Finally, action, an activity, something for me to do. So I head to the car, and on the way, I skip a stone. Where else but on the water? Next thing I know, I'm being yelled at for ruining fishing and being driven home. So for me, fishing doesn't quite hold the sentimental attachment it may for others. Sure, I've fished since, but those were sustenance fishing on camping trips where I'd just eaten too many frickin' refried beans multiple days in a row. Other than that, yeah, just something I don't really enjoy. But for those of you who do, knock your socks out and do tell me if you enjoy it. And our last story, a little fitting, this is almost the month of Halloween, so let's get a little darker here and probe into anatomy's dark history before we bring it full circle to the present with virtual reality. So the dark practice of body snatching directly tied to the advancements in the study of anatomy in medicine. In fact, the term was coined to describe the act of secretly removing corpses from graves for sale to medical schools, where, you guessed it, they would use them for anatomy lessons and, of course, dissections. The first known case, 1319, 4 Italian medical students. It got so bad by the 17th and 18th century that it had reached epic proportions around the world due to the reduction in executions. Executions being the primary source for fresh cadavers. The UK even enacted the Anatomy Act in 1832 to make it a criminal offense. And thankfully nowadays, people donate their bodies to science, and cadaver shortage not quite the problem it used to be. And it's getting even better. Colorado State University has been developing a VR anatomy lab since last summer. It's the summer of 2016. UCSF also using virtual reality as part of its anatomy curriculum. Now, I've talked about an anatomy program called 3D Organon, that and some other non-off-the-shelf solutions being used by those universities. You can have a look at the videos. It's pretty cool what they can do with VR now. Man, I really wish, guys, that they had this around when I was pursuing degrees, because everybody learns different. And for me, I think I may have mentioned this once before, listening to a professor lecture, I just couldn't retain the information. Making notes and listening to lectures, almost completely a waste of time for me. For me, going home, opening the book, testing the code myself, being hands-on, that reinforced the day's lessons. So this would have been right down that alley, being able to do the stuff hands-on for myself in a way that mimics closely real life. But hey, that's what you get going to post-secondary in the 1990s and 2000s. Well, guys, that is it for the news on this Monday. As always, guys, cheers.